Well, this headline freaked me out at first. A recent survey from the Pew Research Center found that 45% of Americans believe we ought to live in a Christian nation. Yikes. Now, the temptation is to say that's crazy because it means nearly half the country wants to live in a theocracy. But that's not entirely true, because the people in that 45% disagree a lot about what Christian nation means in practice. In fact, most Americans still believe church and state should remain separate because they're fans of the Constitution, unlike the ones who declare themselves patriots because they always jump ahead to the Second Amendment.
I want you to win this .50 caliber rifle that Democrats will ban if they keep the House next year.
In case you're not familiar, the phrase Christian nation is not meant to be aspirational. As sociologists Andrew Whitehead and Samuel Perry described in their book Taking America Back for God, Christian nationalism basically represents a fusion of conservative Christianity with civic life. It's not quite a theocracy, but if conservative Christians had their way, it would be a distinction without a difference. The phrase suggests we were founded as a conservative Christian country. We were not, and that we should be guided by conservative Christian principles. We should not. It's not about Jesus. It has nothing to do with Jesus. It's about pushing right-wing beliefs on everybody in the country with regards to LGBTQ rights, gender roles, abortion access, who counts as an American, and control of public institutions like schools and governments. Christian nationalists have become far more prominent in recent years, especially since the January 6, 2021 insurrection attempt, to the point where some of its biggest proponents now use that phrase as a badge of honor. Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene has even said, "I'm a Christian and I say it proudly. We should be Christian nationalists." Florida Governor Ron DeSantis has urged Republicans to wear the full armor of God to win elections, as if that's how it works and not voting. Meanwhile, the other side, the good one, the one that supports church-state separation and secular democracy, is sounding the alarm. In fact, earlier this year, a handful of scholars and activists met with members of the Congressional Free Thought Caucus to go over their report on the connection between Christian nationalism and the attack on the U.S. Capitol.
White Christian nationalism fuses Christianity with a rigid view of civic life, a view that true Americans are white, native-born, and conservative. On January 6th, it was the connective tissue that tied disparate groups together and propelled them to action.
Because those two things were directly intertwined. With all that in mind, what do Americans feel about the phrase Christian nation? The bottom line is that too many Americans don't seem to understand the threats posed by Christian nationalists. For example, the Pew Research Center survey asked Americans what they felt about the term Christian nation without defining it for them. Because of that, the results were all over the place. Look at that. 60% of Americans falsely believe we were originally intended to be a Christian nation. 45% of Americans say we should be one. That's scary. And 33% of Americans say we currently are one. All of them are wrong. I mean, factually wrong in the first case. But, and here's where it gets really weird, the other responses in that chart don't quite match up with those other results. Should Supreme Court members rely on their faith when deciding cases? An astonishing 83% of Americans say no, they are correct. Similarly, 77% of Americans don't want churches or other houses of worship endorsing political candidates. Even among the 45% of Americans who believe we should be a Christian nation, the views are not monolithic. Those people on the left side there, in the dark blue, want a theocracy. 28% of the 45% want an official declaration that we are a Christian nation. If you do the math, that's about 13% of the country. Concerning, yes, but not even close to powerful. That means a lot of people, the majority of people who say we should be a Christian nation, don't really want to go that far when it comes to establishing an official religion, or pushing their religious views on everyone else, or blending church and state. To put that another way, living in a Christian country sounds pretty good to a lot of Americans only because they treat Christian as synonymous with good. But a lot of these Christians in the survey overwhelmingly reject what Christian nationalism looks like in practice, at least based on the warped fantasies of actual Christian nationalists. They think a Christian country is one where people are generally guided by Christian values, or theism in general, but that we don't need laws replicating the Bible or rules that ban non-Christians from holding office. They think a Christian nation is one where most people are Christian, but it's not like they have to be. And importantly, they're not bad people just because they're not. I'm fine with those people.
1 minute, 37 seconds later.
Okay, I can live with those people. When I use the phrase Christian nationalist, I am not talking about those people. I am way more worried about the Christian nationalists who are bigots, racists, anti-feminists, intolerant, and the sort of people you don't invite to Thanksgiving dinner if you can get away with it. I mentioned that Pew Research did not define the phrase for survey respondents, but they asked people what they thought the definition was. One respondent described a Christian nation as a white Christian ethno-state, which deserves bonus points for bluntness and accuracy. Here's another silver lining to these results. While nearly half of all Americans said we should live in a Christian nation, a lot of Americans had no clue what Christian nationalism is. They like the phrase, but they're not familiar with it. They like the idea of living in a nation guided by their interpretation of Christian principles, but they're not part of any movement trying to enforce that. Look at this chart. More than half of Americans, 54% of them, have never heard the term at all. Only 14% of Americans, the ones on the far left of this chart, really know anything about it at all. And of the people who have heard the phrase at all, most of the ones with an opinion on it are against it. You are my people. That means there is a tremendous opportunity to educate people on what Christian nationalism is, why it's bad for the country, and what all of us stand to lose if Christian nationalists acquire even more power than they already have. And while we're at it, we need to stop letting people get away with this idea that being Christian or being religious somehow means you're automatically a good person. No, it doesn't. Faith is not a virtue. Being religious does not make you righteous. I mean, if you've paid any attention to the past few decades, a lot of the people who proclaim themselves Christian in a public way have used their power to hurt as many people as they thought they could get away with. Our country is worse off because Christians successfully blamed non-Christians for all the problems in society. And by non-Christians, I'm including progressive Christians, because Christian nationalists sure as hell don't consider them Christians. They've successfully demonized so many outgroups, and pastors go along with it. And very few white evangelical or Catholic or Southern Baptist leaders have the guts to tell their congregations that the people who don't share their faith are still good, family-loving, hard-working, values-driven people who deserve their support. I asked my friend Andrew Seidel, who just wrote a book called American Crusade, How the Supreme Court is Weaponizing Religious Freedom, which is all about the consequences of Christian nationalism, what he thought about the survey's findings. He told me he was alarmed, but not surprised, and that it was even more reason we needed to defend secularism. He said the wall of separation between church and state is an American original. It is an American invention. We should be proud of and defend that contribution to human rights. And we should challenge those who would undermine it with myths, lies, and disinformation about America being founded as a Christian nation. Shielding our shared laws from religious influence and capture allows Americans to come together as equals to build a stronger democracy. Democracy, equality, and freedom all depend on the separation of church and state. And the separation of church and state, in turn, enables those values. Nothing about what he said is anti-Christian. There is no reason decent Christians can't get on board with everything Andrew just said. Like he said, separation of church and state is good for everyone. But that means Christians who agree we must live in a pluralistic democracy where civil rights are more important than conservative cruelty need to say that publicly every chance they get. And that includes pastors in the pulpit. The more people who listen to you, the more of an obligation you have to use your platform to denounce Christian nationalism and the people who perpetuate it.